Hello everyone, this is Sutherland here, and welcome back to another writing-themed video. Today I'm going to be talking about outlining your book or novel and how to do that because the Camp Nanowrimo for July is coming up, and I want you to be prepared for that so that you can write your novel if you would like to. So basically what an outline is, if you're an outliner, is you basically just write down lots of different details about your book, and then you can use those details to expand upon when you're actually writing your book. And what's important about this is that if you're a plotter, which is someone who likes to plot your book ahead of time, this is a really good thing to do. But if you're a pantser and you like to just write it like without planning it ahead of time first, because usually pantsers think that outlining it ahead of time takes the fun out of it, so that's why they don't like to outline ahead of time. If you're someone who's like that, by all means, don't feel pressured to have to outline it. It's just, in case you need the extra support, it'll be there for you. So, without further ado, let's get started. This outline is a very minimal outline because I do outline, but I outline like very minimally. Some people write like thousands upon thousands of words for their outlines. I just write like a few hundred. So this outline is actually from Wings of Fire. It's from the Forge Your Dragon World book. And that's not a very popular book. Like, lots of people don't have that. So I will be here to share it with you. And keep in mind that since this is from Wings of Fire, it is more like fantasy type outlining. So it has like world building stuff. If you're setting it in like a contemporary present day modern world, then you probably won't need to do like as much world building stuff. So this outline might not be the best one for you, but for all of you fantasy writers, I am here for you. Also, I forgot to mention this earlier, but feel free to grab a paper and a pencil and write down the questions and your answers to them if you would like to. So the first thing that the Wings of Fire model has is pick a conflict. And some of the conflicts that you can choose from are protagonist versus man. So like your character versus another character, or like character entity. Person versus person, essentially. Then there's protagonist versus world. So this could be like a large group of people. There's also protagonist versus society, which is where like they have to break the rules of the society to do something. Then there's protagonist versus fear. This is like the fear that's holding the protagonist back. So this is more of an internal conflict. And then there's protagonist versus self. So that's also more of like an internal conflict because like they are holding them back. And there's protagonist versus nature, which is where like they have natural events like hurricanes or tornadoes going up against them. So personally, I would advise you to have as many of these as you can inside of your story, just to make the conflict layer more interesting. You don't have to include like all of them, but by all means, if possible, try to include an internal and external conflict. Because all stories have to have an external conflict for like the plot of the story and what's going on. But not all stories have an internal conflict, but an internal conflict makes it a lot better. So basically, how you develop an internal conflict is you just think of like a negative trait that your character has. Say your character like is very insecure about themselves, and there's a different character that they are very like jealous of because that character has something that they want. Then your character's internal conflict could be envy, and they could have to be overcoming their envy over the course of the story. So then when they do overcome their envy, that can be like a message to your reader that envy is a bad thing and you should always be grateful for what you have. So basically, the good thing about internal conflict is it just gives an extra layer to your story. So think about that when you are choosing your conflict. The next thing, if you have a fantasy type book, is you can think of a prophecy to create. Now, your prophecy does not always have to be like this, but usually when I write a prophecy, I write a poem, so something that rhymes and something that has a similar amount of syllables in each line. This is kind of like how Tui T. Sutherland did in Wings of Fire, which is probably why it's in here. It's like, when the war has lasted 20 years, the dragonets will come. When the land is soaked in blood and tears, the dragonets will come. Because that rhymes, you know? And it has the same amount of syllables in each line. So, your prophecy can be like a description of the plot, but you don't want to give too much away. So you need to be like a tiny bit vague and mysterious. You also don't want to be so mysterious that your readers are just like extremely confused. So try to avoid that. Then we have creating our character, which in my opinion is the most important thing about the story, because when your reader is reading the story, they're not going to connect to the plot or to the world. They're going to connect most deeply to your character. So your character needs to be someone who is unique and stands out from other characters across media, but also like not too unique. I don't know if that's a thing. Not too unique to the point where like they're not relatable. So they need to be unique but relatable. So here are some questions that you can ask yourself to help you develop your character. The first one is, what is your character trying to find? And this ties back into the internal conflict, because usually internal conflict is desire clashing with fear, clashing with misbelief. So like, your character wants this certain thing. Something is stopping them from getting it, or if nothing is stopping them from getting it, they have some sort of like belief in their mind that's preventing them from getting it, which I guess could also be stopping them, but it's not the same thing as fear. You can either have a fear, a misbelief, or a fatal flaw, which is like the bad personality trait I was giving you earlier, like envy, for example. Then you can write your character's backstory. That's kind of a vague thing, because like, I don't know, that's hard to like expand on without any previous ideas. But yeah, having a backstory for your character is really important. So for that, you can think about your character's like home, where they live, and then like your character's family, or maybe like their relationships with their family. Because if you have a complicated relationship with your family, then it could lead you to become a certain way in the future. Like, if your parents were really mean to you, then it could make you like a sadder person in the future. What powers does your character have? Now, the first thing that comes to mind when reading this is not all characters have to have powers. That's like the number one thing. But the second thing is, by all means, if you want to give your characters powers, go for it. Like, almost every character in my story has powers, or at least like almost all the main characters. The important thing is to give your character like limits to their powers or like weaknesses. So this comes with like magic systems and stuff, but like, please do not make your character overpowered. Like, please give them some sort of like limit or weakness. A good example of this is Superman has lots of amazing powers, but he also has kryptonite as his weakness. So like, just give your characters some kind of weakness that like limits their powers. Please do not make them overpowered. I will literally die. Then, if your character could save one thing from a fire, what would that be? So, this is basically just saying like, what does your character value most in the world? I'm assuming that this is a materialistic item, but I also think that this could probably be a, like, other things. Like, I guess if your fire was at your character's house, then your character could save, like, their phone, or they could save their brother. So, I would probably save my brother, because my brother's an actual person, not a materialistic thing. But take that however you want to. It just shows what your character values the most. What 3 character traits would your character say are most important to them? This is also about what your character values, more so in terms of emotional things than materialistic things. So like, you say your character values bravery, courage, and honor, then they could be like someone who really respects people that protect others. Or there's someone who protects others themselves, because usually what your character values is something that reflects in their own personality. So that can be a way to show how they are as a person, or what they respect in other people. In your character's spare time, what do they like to do? This is more about, like, if you need a subplot for, like, what their job or career is, but I guess it could also be, like, other things. I don't know. If your character encountered an enemy, they would ... This is a good one because it shows how they react to other people. So, your character could be, like, totally calm or chill, or they could be, like, immediately wanting to start a fight with their enemy. This just shows how they are in that aspect, in the terms of encountering the antagonistic force. If your character found treasure, they would ... This is also good because it shows, like, if your character is a selfish person and they keep all the treasure to themselves, or if they have friends or family who are important to them and they share the treasure with those people. If your character found something unexpected, they would ... Something unexpected is kind of a vague phrase, but I'm assuming the unexpected thing is not treasure, since that was what was right above here. I guess something unexpected is, like, if they learned a secret or something, how would they react to it? Like, would they keep the secret? Would they tell other people? I don't know. If your character was trapped in a cave, they would ... This one is more about, like, how your character reacts in a time of crisis, or, like, in a troubling situation. So it's like, would your character stay calm, or would your character panic? Or somewhere in between both of those. If your character met their parents for the first time, they would ... This applies a lot to Wings of Fire, because in Wings of Fire, none of the main POVs know their parents. At least not in the first arc, but by all means, do not feel like your character needs to be an orphan because of this question. If you can, give your character parents. Because apparently, I did not know this before, but apparently it's a really bad cliche to have your character be an orphan, so it just depends on what your story is. In my advice, avoid cliches as much as possible, but if you can have, like, a strong reason to include a cliche, like, if it adds a lot of depth and personality to your story, then you can keep the cliche. If your character found out another character had a crush on them, they would ... So this is another one that's, like, a reaction to secret information, or just, like, strong emotions, because sometimes people react differently when they have stronger emotions, or when they realize that other people are experiencing stronger emotions. If your character was told to read 10 books by next week, they would ... Now, I'm not really sure if this is, like, a question of whether your character is a good reader or not. I think it's more so, like, if your character was given a stressful task, what would they do? So, take it like that. If your character's best friend was captured, they would ... So this is like, would your character immediately jump into the action and go on a search for them? Or would they, like, stay behind for a few days and, like, plan ahead what they're gonna do, or, like, get people to go with them and team up in an allied force? It's just like, how would they attack the regaining of their friend? Would they, like, plan it out ahead of time, or would they just, like, jump straight into it? Create a family tree for your character. And then, this is just, like, your character's parents or siblings if they have them, and then, like, other relatives, cousins, aunts, uncles, nieces, nephews, I don't know. We also have create your character's friends. Your character doesn't have to have friends, but it's probably a good idea if they do, because otherwise, I don't know who else would be in your story. For your friends, we have name, age, pronouns, appearance, powers, home, and family and friends, and personality. So that's basically just to, like, describe in simplistic detail what your friends are like. But if you want your friends, or as they're more technically known as side characters, if you want your side characters to have a more interesting role in your story, you can give them, like, a subplot. Usually your subplot has to go with conquering a smaller misbelief, fear, or fatal flaw. So if you give your side character one of those, then they can conquer that in a subplot. Create your character's enemies. Now, this doesn't have to apply to all books, especially if your book is one with no humanoid antagonistic force. So if your book is more about, like, the forces of nature, or the forces of fate, or the forces of society, and there's no, like, one humanoid antagonist, then you don't have to do this one, but I always feel like even if the antagonist is something else, it's fun to have, like, some sort of person who's, like, against your character. So in Pokemon, there's no, like, enemy, but the main character has lots of rivals that they have to fight on their journey to become the champion. So just think of the enemy as, like, a rival if you don't want to have, like, a major antagonist. And last, we have find your character's voice. This is one that I personally struggle with a lot, but the thing about the character voice is just, like, how are you going to describe the narrative? So if it's written in, like, first person or third person or second person, I guess, if you want to write that way, then this can, like, fluctuate a lot, but basically, the voice is how your character describes the story, or, like, describes the world around them, or how they see the world around them, really. But it's just, like, getting deep into their point of view and, like, using words that they would use and, like, having them say things that would sound natural for them to say. It's stuff like that. So, yeah. Moving on from that very long section. Oh my god, this is going to be such a long video. We have building your world. And once again, this is more for fantasy writers than, like, contemporary, modern day, realistic writers. But we have continent name, or just, like, world name, I guess. It doesn't have to be a continent if it's, like, one kingdom in a specific world. Environments, so this is, like, what habitats there are. There could be, like, how there are in Wings of Fire. A mountain range, a swamp, a rainforest, a beach, a desert, a tundra, all of that stuff. Residents, this is, like, who are the people living there? The natives of the land. Like, what do they call themselves? How do they live? I think it gets more into that in a second. Magic, this is about the magic system, like how I was talking about earlier. The most important thing with the magic system is that you have rules and you keep it consistent. So just keep that in mind. And history. So try not to go too in-depth into this. Your readers will get incredibly bored. But if there's anything significant that majorly impacts your world, that your readers 100% need to know about or else they'll be incredibly confused, then you can include that in your history of the world. So, we're going to design our continent or our land. It's just a description of what it looks like or, like, what things are there. Creating the rules of our world, because at the end of the day, all worlds have to have some form of government or else they'll go completely unstable. So, assuming you have a good government in place, you have some laws, and those laws are the quote-unquote rules of your world. Search for magic. This is, like, finding your magic system if you have one. Once again, you don't have to have one if you're writing, like, a more realistic style book. But if you're writing a fantasy book, you can search for your magic system. Make sure that your magic system has your rules for consistency purposes. And make sure that your rules are also not overpowered. Like how the single character was not overpowered. Please do not make your magic system overpowered. A good example of this is the Animus magic in Wings of Fire. Because Animus in Wings of Fire can do almost anything, which is, like, completely overpowered. So please do not do that. That's why Animuses are overpowered, because Tui T Sutherland did not involve rules for her magic system in her outline. Create the wildlife of your world. So this is, like, what animals live there and stuff like that. And if you have multiple habitats, you can talk about, like, which animals live in which habitats and why. Describe the food, so you can talk about, like, if your people are carnivores or herbivores or omnivores, like what types of food they eat. I wouldn't put this as too important, but I don't know. Do what you want. Create your communities. This is, like, your groups of people. You could have, like, clans, tribes, powers and weaknesses. This goes with the magic system. You can describe the powers and describe their weaknesses. So, like, a good example of this also is, like, in Pokemon, which I've referenced, like, 3 times in this video. We have fire, grass, and water types, which there are other types, obviously, but just using this as a good example. Fire type is weak to water type, but fire type is strong against grass type. And if you think about the logics behind this, that's because fire can burn grass and then water can extinguish fire. So just think about stuff like that when you're thinking about your powers and your weaknesses. Create your character's home. This is describing what your character's home looks like. Maybe how it feels like if you want to get deep into the emotions. And then the last thing you can do is write a summary, which is probably one of the hardest parts of the whole entire thing. But the summary is just where you're taking your whole entire book concept idea and putting it into, I would say, 5 sentences or less. I don't know. Because I feel like the summary is the same thing as the book blurb, which sometimes book blurbs have really long paragraphs that are a lot more than 5 sentences, but I feel like if you have a long book blurb, you give away too much information. That or you bore your reader. So a good summary is one that tells you something that intrigues you in the book, like a hook to get you attached to the idea. It expands on it a tiny bit so you know the major details and information. It leaves a question in your mind, but it doesn't give anything away, so it leaves it as a mystery. You don't want to have your readers knowing what's going to happen before they even read the book. So, yeah, that's just something to keep in mind. But anyways, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope that you had a great time, and I hope that you were able to make an amazing outline using this, which is once again not my own original creation. It's from Wings of Fire Forge Your Dragon World book, and it always means so much to me that you have come here to support me. So if you have not already, please like the video, and if you're not already subscribed, please do that so that you can stay tuned for more content like this. And usually I post Wings of Fire stuff, which is partially part of this video because this is a Wings of Fire outline, but this is a writing video, mostly. I'll be posting more writing content very soon because next month is Camp Nanowrimo. Let's go! So I'll be posting lots of content for Camp Nanowrimo, which I will be participating in because I do have time for that, and I would love to do that. So, yeah, I will see you later, and I hope that until then, you have a great rest of your day, and remember that I love you. Goodbye, everyone!